I didn't at the time, I suppose, consciously think of it as overcoming obstacles, but if I look back on it, I suppose the biggest obstacle I faced, which wasn't really an obstacle for me, as an obstacle for anybody in the country, is when I was your age there wasn't a Scottish Parliament. So the post of First Minister didn't even exist. So the idea back then, even though I was really interested in politics, that I was going to pursue a career in politics and become a minister or First Minister was just pie in the sky, really. So getting a Scottish Parliament established was the first big obstacle, I suppose. And then, you know, being elected to Parliament, being a minister and having to make sure that I did that job well, persuading my party I was the right person, and I suppose overcoming attitudes along the way that, not overtly, but I suppose implicitly, are of the variety that says women shouldn't be at the top in politics, etc. So those are the kind of obstacles, but I'm saying that looking back on it, I haven't gone through my career thinking, oh, there's another obstacle in front of me. And actually one of the things, although I'm First Minister and people think if you're First Minister you must have spent a lifetime planning to become First Minister, it's not really how it works. You know, I'm in politics, I'm a politician. You know, what I focus on every day is just doing whatever job I'm doing to the best of my ability and not really planning ahead in terms of my own career that much. I'm a great believer, and this applies in every walk of life, that ambition is a good thing, but if you become consumed by ambition about what you want to do in the future at the expense of what you're doing in the here and now, then you'll probably not achieve what you're doing in the future because you won't be as good as you could be at what you're doing in the present.
Nicole, where are you?
What is your view of the privatisation of the NHS which may be happening in England?
It's a very good question, Nicole. I am very, very opposed to the NHS being privatised. The NHS is a public service, and it is, I think, our most precious public service. And this idea that if you fall sick, and anybody, illness, sickness, disease, anybody can fall sick and anybody can get cancer or dementia, and the idea that if that happens to you, your ability to access treatment should depend on your ability to pay for it is one of the things that I just find completely unacceptable. Healthcare should be there, funded by all of us through our taxes and available to all of us when we need it. Now, our health service isn't perfect. There are, many cases where people will wait too long for treatment, or where certain treatments are not available in the way that they should be in our health service. So it's not perfect, but our system of a publicly funded and publicly available health service is by far better than any alternative. And I think we're starting to see in England with privatisation some of the problems that come from that, with the health service becoming very fragmented and broken up. I'll give you an example. Our accident and emergency departments have been under a lot of pressure over the winter, as they always are. But none of our accident and emergency departments have done what many in England have done, which is declare, states of emergency, effectively major incidents. And the reason for that is our health service is integrated. So if the Southern General in Glasgow is under too much demand and it can't cope anymore, the health board that runs the Southern General can divert patients to the Victoria Infirmary, because it also runs the Victoria Infirmary. In England, every hospital is separate, and they don't, so every hospital is run separately, so there's not that same ability to integrate and to allow patients to be treated across the system. And of course, I think in terms of the Western world, the best example, or perhaps the worst example of a privatised healthcare system is the United States, where many people cannot get treatment for even the most basic of illnesses sometimes because they don't have health insurance. So I think the model we've got here is the best one. Doesn't mean it's perfect. A lot of improvement could be made to it, but it's far better than going down the privatisation route.
What impact do you think the induction of free school meals for all Junior 1 to Junior 3 pupils will have on the country's general welfare and education standards?
I think it will have a positive effect. That positive effect won't happen overnight. It will, feed through over a period of years. But we introduced free school meals for primaries 1 to 3 after doing quite an in-depth study of a pilot exercise we had done, and the findings of that pilot exercise showed that when you have all pupils in a class getting the same access to free school meals, then a number of things happen. Firstly, the uptake of school meals amongst the poorer pupils improves, because one of the problems with having means tested school meals is that children get embarrassed to have access to school meals. So the children who most need that hot meal in the middle of the day don't access it because they don't want the stigma that's attached to being eligible for free school meals. So when you take that away and you make it available to everybody, then the people who most need it end up getting better access to it. And secondly, having everybody with a meal in the middle of the day improved educational attainment and educational performance across almost every measurement of that. So children more alert, more able to learn, the outcomes from the learning were better. So it's one of these things that costs a lot of money to do, but the amount of money it costs to do it is as nothing potentially compared to the benefits that we'll get out of it over the longer term.
How will the new South Hospital be able to cope with the demands of the 3 hospitals it's replacing, considering that the A&E is no bigger than that of the Southern General?
Well, there's been a lot of, the new South Glasgow Hospital has been in planning for a long, long time. I remember about 10 years ago when I was the opposition health spokesperson, it was first being planned then. So there has a lot of work has gone into designing the hospital, looking at the capacity that the hospital will need, not just in A&E but in all of the different parts of the hospital, and there is also flexibility built into the hospital in terms of bed numbers, etc. So I'm a politician. I'm not a health planner in the sense of I don't do all the technical work there, but I have paid a lot of attention over the years to that, and I'm confident those who are planning the hospital are making the right judgments. One of the things about A&E, and this is a big challenge, and it's much easier to say than to do, but it is a challenge for us over the next few years, is to reduce the number of people that go to accident emergency. Not to stop people who need to be accident emergency going there, but to try to have other places that we encourage people to go if what's wrong with them doesn't really require emergency treatment. So the Victoria Infirmary, for example, has a minor injuries unit where we're trying to encourage people to go to in the first instance, unless of course they really need accident emergency care. Now all of that is a bit more than planning for health services. It involves changing people's attitudes and patterns of behaviour. But our accident emergencies tend to see an awful lot of people that if they felt confident in GP services or NHS 24 or their minor injury unit, they wouldn't go to A&E, they would go to these other services. And what we need to do is make sure that as we're designing the accident and emergency facilities of the future, we're not just locking in all of that demand that should be going elsewhere, we're actually trying to make sure that people are getting to the right parts of the health service.
We all attended the big referendum debate at the Hydro. What did you learn from engaging with the younger voters?
I loved that we all there. Yeah, fantastic. I was saying earlier on to the Principal and Dr. Cameron, it was the best event I did in the whole referendum campaign. And I wasn't expecting it to be. When I got invited to do it, I thought, 10,000 16 and 17-year-olds? That's not going to work. That's going to be a disaster. So I kind of went along feeling a little bit sceptical about it and thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm looking forward to this. But then, that moment of stepping into the auditorium and just feeling that atmosphere, it was utterly terrifying in that moment. But it was fantastic. And what I learned that day, and I think that was the day that it really struck me what the referendum and giving votes to 16 and 17-year-olds had done, because the most impressive thing about that debate was nothing that the politicians said. It was the quality of the questions and the understanding and just the general level of sophistication in that audience. And I went away from that just feeling so enthused about the future of the country, regardless almost of the outcome of the referendum. We suddenly created a generation of young people that cared about politics and about the future of the country, and that is incredibly special. And after the debate was over, the few days after that, I think every single young person I spoke to on the campaign trail had either been there or claimed to have been there or knew somebody who'd been there. So it wasn't just that the debate enthused the people in the Hydro that day, it really electrified debate amongst young people. So well done to everybody who was there. I thought it was an absolutely fantastic event.
Do you think there will be another independence referendum in our lifetime?
Yes. I do, but it won't be me that decides that. Well, it may be me that is the leader of the government that passes the legislation to make it happen, but it will only happen if enough people in Scotland want it to happen. I can't and wouldn't try to impose a referendum on people against the will of the country. So there will be another referendum if enough people vote for a party that promises that in a manifesto. And if that happens, then that's because the country wants it to happen. I do think there will be one. I can't tell you when that will be. I'd be fairly confident it will be within your lifetimes and within my lifetime. But what I think is beyond any doubt is that, put aside the question of another referendum, the country's changed forever because of the last referendum, and Scotland is only going to become more powerful in terms of our ability to run our own affairs. That is the direction of travel. And it may be that we just wake up one morning and think, you know what, we've kind of accrued all these extra powers for our parliament, we're pretty much independent already, we might as well just take the final step. Or maybe there'll be something that happens that makes us think we really should look at this again. One of the things that I think might, and I put it no more strongly than that, might make people in Scotland think it's time to look at the independence question again, is if there's a referendum on the European Union that ends up having Scotland taken out of the European Union when we might not have voted to come out of the European Union. So there are things that may happen, but it will only happen if people want it, and I think we will get to that stage at some point.
Thanks, Ailey. I noticed you didn't say you'd think it would happen in my lifetime. Okay, what is that? Millie, you've got a question.
Do you feel extra pressure being the first female First Minister?
Yes, I do. There's no doubt about it. I've been really moved over the week since I became First Minister by the number of women and girls of all ages and all political persuasions. So it's not just people who vote SNP or who, like me, all walks of life. The number of women and girls who've contacted me in some way or I've met in the street who've told me how much it means to them personally to have a woman doing the top job in politics in the country. And so I do feel an extra responsibility. I suppose anybody who's doing the first of anything feels that responsibility not to let the side down and to make sure that what I leave is a a legacy of people thinking having a woman First Minister is A, a good thing, and B, an entirely normal thing to do. So it's definitely an extra sense of responsibility, but a very special one. And I really, really mean it when I say one of the things I want to move forward as First Minister, and I can't do it all, but if I can lead by example to help women everywhere understand that nothing's off limits or out of reach. If you're good enough, if you work hard enough, then the sky is the limit, not some artificial glass ceiling, and I'll do everything I can to try and not just make people believe that, but to make that more of a reality than it has been in the past.
Thank you. Perhaps a slightly more self-interested question from Hiba.
Most of us hope to be going to university in the future. Can we be confident that tuition fees will not be introduced in Scotland?
If I've got anything to do with it, you can be absolutely 100% confident that there will be no tuition fees. I can't speak for other parties. If other parties are in government in Scotland, whether that's the Conservatives who now say they would introduce tuition fees, or Labour who have introduced tuition fees in the past, I can't guarantee it, but if my party is in power, there will be no tuition fees. I feel strongly about a lot of things in politics, but this is probably, if I had to single out one thing that I feel most strongly about, it would be access to education. You know, I think about my own experience in life. I mean, I grew up in a working class area in Ayrshire. I was the first person in my family to go to university. If I and my family had faced the prospect of tuition fees back then, I wouldn't have gone to university. Not because my mum and dad wouldn't have desperately wanted to do everything they could to let me go to university, it just wouldn't have been possible. And even if it was a case of you don't have to pay them until you graduate, the idea of accumulating that kind of debt, I am absolutely sure would have led to me not going to university. So I had that opportunity, and it's education probably more than any other single thing that lets me sit here now in the position I hold. And so I feel very, very strongly that if I've had that opportunity, I've got no right to take it away from you. So as long as I'm in politics, I will passionately fight to keep access to university free of all tuition fees.
Ailsa.
How long do you think it will be before we achieve genuine gender equality in Scotland?
Oh, that's a good question, and quite a tough question. I hope, I mean, I said in Assembly there, and I said it when I made my speech in Parliament when I became First Minister, that I kind of reference my own niece when I think about these things. She's 8 years old, and I really hope that by the time she's your age, you know, leaving school, going to university, becoming a young woman, that all of these things today that hold women back, whether that's the gender pay gap or just the fact that women are underrepresented in so many areas, or you know, lack of access to childcare for mothers to pursue careers. I hope all of these things are just a distant memory. Now that's not that long a period, but can we do it? Well, if there is a determination and a will on the part of everybody to make that happen, then I don't see why we can't. And what it does mean is people like me in positions of responsibility have to firstly lead by example, which is why my cabinet is gender balanced. Every single member of my cabinet is there because they deserve to be, but I make no bones about it. That is meant to send a signal to businesses, to other organisations in the country that they should be striving to do the same. We are more than 50% of the population, and you know, as I said down there, if you see any company board or public authority board or government that's not got proper gender representation, that's when you should be thinking it's not appointed on merit. Because if we're 50% or more of the population, then presumably if it's a real meritocracy, these organisations should have 50% or thereabouts of women on them. So I'm optimistic, but it's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of challenging of some of the vested interests that want to hold it back.
Thank you very much, Rosa. I just get time for one more question before I hand over to Mr. Farley. If anyone has an impromptu question that they would like to put, just off the cuff.
These are always the killer ones.
I'll ask a question in the girls' list.
It's your school, you're allowed. No.
Should we take a vote?
Does anybody else want, does anybody want to ask a question? If not, I will.
We all now want to know what your question is.
Just when you mentioned being the first female First Minister, and you know that you have found that there's not difficulties but pressures with that. Does the spectre of Margaret Thatcher in the background, having been a female Prime Minister, does that put any extra pressure on you? Is it something you even think about?
Well, unlike everybody else here, apart from these two, I remember Margaret Thatcher as Minister, and you probably don't. None of you remember Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister. In a strange sort of way, Margaret Thatcher was one of the motivations for me to be in politics. Not because I admired her, but because she was the opposite of everything I stood for and believed in. And it was to challenge her notion of society, apart from anything else, that I, as a young girl, probably very naive, got involved in politics. So I suppose I can say in some respects she was a role model, but in a pretty perverse way. You know, she was the first woman Prime Minister, but I guess what I want to make sure is that as the first woman First Minister, unlike Margaret Thatcher, it's not another 20 years after I stop being First Minister till we see another woman First Minister.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Farley, for that question. And I'll now turn over to yourself.
I'm sure, again, you'll all want to thank Ms. Sturgeon for not only having given the Assembly, but taking the time to listen to your questions. And, you know, there's no notes there or anything. Ms. Sturgeon didn't get the questions beforehand. She just answered them honestly from her heart, and I think that says a lot for her as well. I think, Anissa, have you got anything you would like to present to Ms. Sturgeon?
Again, we'd just like to say thank you very much for taking the time out today to come and talk to us. You're a very, very inspirational lady to all of us here today, and we do have a very small token of our appreciation.
Thank you all, girls, and I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found it informative. I'm sure you have. It's not very often that you get the First Minister of Scotland coming to school to speak directly to you. So as I take my Sturgeon downstairs, I'm sure you want to thank her again before we go.